Amara's mornings always began the same way. She woke before the sun, listening to the world instead of seeing it. The birds outside her window chirped in a rhythm she had memorized, and the distant sound of buses starting their routes told her the city was alive again. She reached for her cane beside the bed, her fingers brushing its smooth handle, her most loyal companion. For Amara, being blind wasn't new. She had lost her sight when she was a little girl, too young to remember colors, but old enough to remember light. Now, darkness was her constant world, yet she had learned to move with confidence. She knew how to count steps from her room to the kitchen, how to pour her own tea by listening to the rising liquid, and how to tie her shoelaces with quick, practiced hands. Her mother always reminded her before she left for school, "Walk with your head high, Amara. Don't let anyone make you feel smaller." Amara would smile and nod, even when she felt the weight of those words pressing on her heart. The walk to school was steady. Her cane tapped the pavement, guiding her forward. She could smell the fresh bread from the bakery on the corner, hear children laughing as they ran ahead, and sense the energy of the morning crowd. But once she stepped into the school gates, the air felt different. Inside the classrooms and hallways, Amara's world was less kind. Most of her classmates didn't know how to treat her. Some ignored her completely, as if blindness made her invisible. Others offered fake kindness, speaking to her in slow, exaggerated tones as though she couldn't understand. But the worst. Were the bullies, the ones who whispered cruel jokes, laughed when she stumbled, or thought it was funny to move her belongings out of reach. Every day was a test of patience in class. Amara listened carefully, her ears sharper than anyone else's. While others scribbled notes, she memorized every word the teacher spoke. Still, she often felt the stares. When she raised her hand to answer, some classmates snickered quietly, mocking her confidence. "What does she know? She can't even see." One boy whispered once. Amara heard him clearly, but she kept her face calm. She had learned long ago that responding only gave them power. Lunchtime was worse. She often sat alone at a corner table, eating slowly while laughter filled the cafeteria around her. Sometimes students would accidentally bump into her, spilling her drink or scattering her food. "Oops," they would say, smirking, while others laughed. Amara would quietly clean the mess, refusing to cry in front of them. She carried her pain silently, her heart heavy, but her spirit unbroken. There were days when she returned home exhausted, not from the lessons, but from the constant effort of pretending their words didn't hurt. Alone in her room, she allowed herself to feel the sting of their cruelty. Yet even then, she never let the tears last long. She wiped them away and reminded herself, "I am stronger than they think. They only see my blindness, not me." What no one at school realized was how fiercely independent Amara was outside of their shallow world. At home, she could cook simple meals, fold laundry, and even help her younger brother with his homework. Her memory was sharp, her sense of direction precise, her ability to adapt incredible. She never saw herself as helpless, only different. Still, the bullying weighed on her. The constant humiliation chipped at her confidence. She longed for the day when someone would see her not for her blindness, but for her abilities. And yet, even in her darkest moments, Amara carried a secret. Every evening after school, while her classmates played video games or scrolled through their phones, Amara trained. Her mother had enrolled her in karate when she was young, determined to give her daughter strength and confidence. At first, people doubted. "How can a blind girl learn karate?" they asked. But Amara's instructors quickly discovered her hidden gift, her heightened senses, her sharp hearing, her awareness of movement in the air. Through years of practice, she learned to fight without sight. She learned to feel the vibrations of footsteps, to hear the shift of breath before an attack, to block, strike, and move with precision. Karate gave her discipline, confidence, and power. She earned her black warrior rank with pride a symbol, not just of skill, but of her unbreakable will. But at school, no one knew. To her classmates, she was still the blind girl, an easy target, someone to mock. And Amara chose not to reveal her strength, not yet. She kept her karate training hidden, carrying her quiet power in silence. Every day, she endured the jokes, the whispers, the humiliations, walking with calm dignity, waiting. She wasn't afraid of the bullies. But she knew that showing her strength too soon would only make her different in another way. So she waited for the right moment, the right time. Because one day, when the bullies pushed too far, when they crossed the line from words to action, they would finally discover the truth. The blind girl they humiliated was not weak. She was a warrior. At every school, there are students who find joy in kindness, and there are those who find power in cruelty. For Amara, the cruel ones always seemed to notice her. They saw her cane tapping the floor, her careful steps, her calm silence, and, instead of respecting her courage, they saw an opportunity to mock. The bullies came in a small group, 3 boys and 2 girls. They were loud, confident, and cruel in the way only children can be when they believe no one will stop them. They weren't failing students or outcasts. They were the type who blended in easily, laughing loudly in the cafeteria, showing off in front of others, and pretending their meanness was just a joke. But for Amara, those jokes were daily wounds. It often started with whispers. As Amara walked down the hallway, cane in hand, she would hear them behind her. "Careful, she's gonna trip over nothing." Another voice would add, "Maybe she's walking so slow because she's counting the tiles." Their laughter echoed down the hall, sharp and ugly. Amara never turned her head. She kept walking, calm and steady, though every word pierced her heart. Sometimes they would block her path. One of the girls would stand right in front of her without saying a word, waiting until Amara's cane tapped against her shoes. The sudden stop always drew laughter from the group. "Oops," the girl would say in a sweet, fake voice. "Didn't see me there? Oh wait, of course you didn't." The others would howl with laughter, their voices bouncing off the walls. Lunchtime was even worse. The cafeteria was crowded and noisy, the perfect place for them to humiliate her in front of others. More than once, one of the boys would kick her chair as she tried to sit, making her stumble. Another time, they pushed her tray just out of reach, laughing as she fumbled for it. "What's wrong? Can't find your food?" one sneered. The cruelest moments were when they pretended to help. One of the bullies would offer to guide her to class, speaking in a loud, exaggerated voice as if she couldn't hear properly either. "Don't worry, sweetheart, I'll walk you there," he'd say, tugging at her arm roughly while his friend snickered. Amara hated those moments most of all, not because she needed help, but because they twisted kindness into a weapon. Teachers sometimes saw the bullying, but the bullies were clever. They disguised their cruelty as clumsy accidents or harmless jokes. A spilled drink, a playful shove, an insult whispered just low enough that the teacher didn't hear. And when Amara tried to explain, the bullies would widen their eyes. In mock innocence, "We didn't mean it," they'd say sweetly. "She's too sensitive." Each time, Amara swallowed her anger. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and refused to give them the tears they wanted. But inside, she carried the sting of their words, the humiliation of their laughter. What the bullies never noticed, what they never cared to see, was the quiet strength behind her calm. They thought their cruelty made them powerful. They thought her silence meant she was weak. But Amara was not weak. Every insult was a test, every humiliation a lesson in patience. She absorbed their cruelty without breaking, her spirit hardening, like steel beneath the surface. There was one day that stood out. A day when the bullying became more than whispers and tricks. It was during gym class. The students were lined up in the gymnasium, laughing and talking while the teacher gathered equipment. Amara stood quietly with her cane, waiting for instructions. The bullies saw their chance. One of the boys snatched her cane and held it high, laughing as she reached for it. "Looking for this?" he taunted, waving it just out of reach. The others laughed, egging him on. Amara's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "Give it back," she said firmly. But they didn't. They tossed it between them like a toy, laughing each time she turned toward the sound. The gym echoed with their cruel fun, while other students watched silently, unsure whether to intervene. "Careful," one of the girls mocked. "She might karate chop you." The group burst into laughter at their own joke, not realizing how close they were to the truth. Finally, the teacher noticed and stormed over, snatching the cane back and scolding the group. They pretended to look guilty, muttering half-hearted apologies. Amara took the cane, her hands trembling, and whispered a quiet thank you. But inside, something had shifted. That was the moment she realized their cruelty would not stop on its own. They believed they could humiliate her forever, that she would always stay silent, always endure. But Amara knew differently. Pictured the power to stop them. Not with anger, not with insults, but with the strength they could never imagine she possessed. Still, she waited. She told herself patience was better than reaction. She continued to walk calmly, to endure the whispers and the laughter. But deep inside, she carried her secret, her years of training, her warrior's spirit. She knew the day would come when the bullies would push too far, when they would try to break her completely, and on that day, it would learn the truth. Because Amara was not just the blind girl they mocked. She was a black warrior in karate, a fighter who had mastered discipline, focus, and strength. They thought they were powerful. They thought she was weak. But soon, they would discover they were wrong. It was a Friday afternoon, the kind of day when students were restless, waiting for the weekend. The sun spilled across the schoolyard, where groups of kids laughed, played, and lingered before heading home. Amara walked slowly across the courtyard, tapping her cane in front of her, each sound guiding her steps. She could hear the chatter, the squeak of sneakers on concrete. The distant sound of a basketball hitting the ground. For most students, it was just another day. For the bullies, it was an opportunity. They spotted her from across the yard alone, steady, moving carefully through the crowd. A grin spread across the face of the ringleader. "Watch this," he whispered to his friends, and together, they moved like a pack of wolves circling their prey. Amara felt it before she heard them. The sudden hush in the air, the shift in footsteps around her. She gripped her cane tighter. She knew their presence, their mocking energy. Well. One of the girls sneered, her voice loud enough to draw attention. "Look who's here. Little Miss can't see." Laughter followed. Heads turned, students began to gather, curious. Amara stayed still, her face calm. She had endured their words countless times before, but today they wanted more than whispers. One boy reached out and flicked her cane sideways, making it stumble against the pavement. Amara quickly steadied it, holding it close. "Give it back," she said firmly. "Oh, come on," the boy mocked, snatching it from her hands in one swift motion. He waved it in the air like a trophy. "What are you gonna do now, huh? Can't find your way without this, can you?" The crowd erupted in laughter. More students gathered, their voices buzzing with curiosity and discomfort. Some laughed nervously, some stayed silent, unsure whether to intervene. Amara stood tall, her voice steady. "Give it back." But the bullies weren't finished. They tossed her cane between them, each catching it, just as she turned her head toward the sound. "Over here," one jeered. "No, wait, here." Another shouted, throwing it again. The scene grew louder, uglier. The bullies shouted insults. There. Laughter sharp like knives. What's wrong? Can't see us? She's so helpless. This is too easy. Amara's chest tightened, her fists curling at her sides. She had endured their cruelty countless times, but this was different. This was not whispered jokes in the hallway. This was not a spilled drink at lunch. This was humiliation, public and cruel, designed to strip her of her dignity in front of everyone. She could hear the crowd clearly now, the gasps, the whispers, the silence of those too afraid to step forward. Somewhere, a teacher's voice called faintly from the distance, but no one came yet. One of the bullies, emboldened by the laughter, stepped closer. He shoved her shoulder lightly, making her stumble half a step. "Careful," he mocked. "Don't fall. You might break something." Amara steadied herself, her jaw tight. Her patience was fraying. Then came the final straw. Another boy leaned close and snatched her backpack from her shoulder, spilling its contents onto the concrete. Books, notebooks, a small water bottle all scattered across the ground. The bullies roared with laughter as one of them kicked her notebook away like a soccer ball. "Oops, looks like you dropped something." One of them jeered. The humiliation stung deeper than ever before. Not because she couldn't pick up her things, but because they wanted her to bend, to scramble helplessly while they laughed. They wanted to make her feel powerless. For a moment, Amara stood still, her face calm but her body trembling. Inside, anger burned hot, mixing with sadness and years of pain. She had always chosen patience. She had always chosen silence. But as the bullies laughed louder, throwing her belongings around like toys, Amara knew something had changed. She crouched slowly, her hands reaching for her books. But her movements were calm, deliberate, not broken, not desperate. Around her, the bullies mocked louder. Thinking they had won, what they didn't know was that Amara's mind was no longer focused on their words. She was listening, deeper listening to the sound of their footsteps, the rhythm of their breathing, the vibrations in the ground when they moved. Her karate training had taught her to feel the world in ways others never could. Every laugh, every taunt, every careless step gave her information. The crowd grew restless. Some students whispered, "This is too much." Others shifted uncomfortably, guilt in their silence. But no one stopped the bullies. Finally, the ringleader stepped closer, crouching down just beside her. His voice was mocking but sharp. "What's the matter, blind girl? Gonna cry?" Amara straightened slowly, her head turning toward him. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, controlled, almost chilling in its quiet strength. The bully froze, just for a second, confused by her expression. The laughter around him faltered slightly, though no one understood why. Amara's patience had reached its limit. She stood tall, her shoulders squared, her body no longer trembling. Though she said nothing, her very posture had changed. The crowd sensed it. The bullies didn't yet understand it, but they felt it. Something in the air shifted, subtle but undeniable. It was the stillness before a storm. The blind girl they had mocked, the one they thought was helpless, was no longer standing as their victim. She was standing as something else, something they could not yet see, but would soon never forget. The schoolyard was still buzzing with laughter, but Amara's face had changed. She no longer looked like a girl cornered by cruelty. Her stillness carried something different now, something the bullies couldn't name, but could feel. What no? One around her knew was that Amara had been preparing for this moment her whole life. From the outside, she was just a blind girl with a cane. But behind the quiet steps and calm expressions was a hidden strength forged through years of discipline. Amara was not just a student, she was a warrior. Her journey had begun years earlier, long before these bullies ever laughed at her. Amara was 6 when her mother first brought her to the small dojo tucked away in a quiet neighborhood street. The mats smelled faintly of sweat and soap, the walls lined with wooden practice weapons and photos of smiling students. At first, the instructor hesitated. "Karate requires focus, precision, sight," he said gently. "Are you sure this is right for her?" Her mother stood firm. "She doesn't need sight. She has everything else. She has heart." The instructor agreed to try. At the beginning, Amara stumbled often. She couldn't see the stance of her peers, couldn't copy their movements. She learned slowly, through touch and sound. The instructor would guide her hands into the correct position, place her feet carefully, describe every movement with words instead of gestures. It was harder than it was for anyone else, but Amara never gave up. Day after day, week after week, she returned. She learned to hear footsteps instead of seeing them. She learned to feel the rush of air when a hand moved near her. She learned to sense vibrations on the floor when an opponent shifted weight. What others saw with their eyes, Amara saw with her body. Her fellow students began to notice. At first, they pitied her. Later, they admired her. Soon, they feared sparring with her, because she moved in ways they didn't expect, blocking strikes before they landed, countering attacks with precision. Karate gave Amara more than skills. It gave her discipline, confidence, and calm. It taught her that strength was not about anger, but about control. It wasn't about hurting others. It was about protecting yourself and those around you. By the time she was a teenager, Amara had earned her Black Warrior belt. The ceremony was small, quiet, filled with clapping and warm smiles from her dojo family. To outsiders, it was just a colored belt tied around her waist. To Amara, it was proof that she was not weak, proof that blindness had not stopped. Her proof that she carried within her the spirit of a warrior. Yet, outside the dojo, she chose silence. At school, she never mentioned karate. She never told anyone about the hours of training, the bruises earned in sparring, the respect she had gained from fighters twice her size. She walked with her cane, keeping her strength hidden, not because she was ashamed, but because she understood something greater. Strength isn't about showing off, so about knowing when to use it. Every insult from the bullies, every laugh, every shove, she endured it with patience. Not because she couldn't fight back, but because she knew real power wasn't in striking fists. It was in restraint. But deep down, Amara knew there would come a time when silence would no longer be enough. There would come a day when the bullies crossed a line so far that patience would no longer be protection, it would be permission. That day was coming, back in the schoolyard. Amara stood tall among the circle of students. Her cane was gone, her books scattered, the laughter of the bullies sharp in the air. But inside her, something had shifted. Her breath slowed, her ears tuned in. The sound of sneakers scraping the concrete told her where the bullies stood. The rhythm of their laughter revealed who was closest, who was stepping forward, who was hesitating. Even the faint tremor of footsteps around her painted a clear picture of the crowd. She didn't need eyes to see them. She could feel the boy in front of her, the one who had shoved her shoulder, his weight leaning forward on his toes, his breath sharp with arrogance. She could sense the girl on her left twirling her hair, smirking. She could hear the other boys behind her, shifting nervously as though they weren't sure what would happen next. Amara's posture straightened. Her shoulders relaxed, her fists loosened, not clenched in anger, but ready in calm discipline. The crowd didn't understand what they were seeing, they only felt it. A strange, heavy silence in the middle of the noise. Something invisible pressed against the air, something powerful. One of the bullies laughed nervously, breaking the tension. What's wrong with her? Why is she standing like that? Another shrugged, tossing her cane into the dirt. "She's just a blind girl. What's she gonna do?" Amara's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. She wasn't going to answer with words. She wasn't going to explain. She wasn't going to warn them. Because warriors don't announce themselves. They wait. They listen. And when the moment comes, they act. In that silence, Amara carried her secret like a blade in its sheath. She was calm, but inside, she was ready. Ready to end the cycle of humiliation. Ready to show them that strength had been standing in front of them all along, hidden in plain sight. The bullies still thought she was powerless. The crowd still thought she would endure. But Amara knew something they didn't. Her silent strength was about to speak. The crowd in the schoolyard grew thicker. More students gathered, drawn by the noise, drawn by curiosity. Some came because they wanted to see the drama. Others came because they were too afraid not to. And right in the center stood Amara her. Cane tossed aside, her belongings scattered across the ground, and the bullies circling her like predators. She stood still, her head slightly lifted. Listening, the ringleader, a tall boy with too much confidence and too little kindness, stepped closer. He was used to the laughter of the crowd, used to being cheered on. He fed on it. And now, he wanted to take things further. "You know," he said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Maybe we should test just how helpless she really is." The words cut through the air, sharper than knives. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some students shifted uncomfortably, their guilt heavy, but none spoke up. The boy reached forward and gave Amara's shoulder another shove, this time harder. She stumbled half a step, but quickly caught her balance. His friends laughed louder. "Careful," one of them shouted. "Don't fall." The shove wasn't enough to break her. She steadied herself, her breath calm, her fists loose at her sides. She had endured worse. She could endure this. But the boy wasn't finished. He crouched suddenly, grabbed her backpack from the ground, and dumped the last of her belongings into the dirt. Her notebooks landed in a puddle. Her water bottle rolled away across the concrete. He smirked, looking around to make sure the crowd saw it all. "Oops," he said, with mock innocence. "My bad." The laughter was cruel, sharp, and endless. Amara's chest tightened. For years, she had endured every insult, every trick, every cruel laugh. She had told herself patience was strength, that silence was dignity. She had swallowed her anger, believing that walking away made her stronger. But now, something inside her cracked. It wasn't the words. It wasn't even the shove. It was the look of satisfaction on the boy's face as he humiliated her. The way his friends cheered him on. The way the crowd let it happen. Her patience snapped like a thread pulled too tight. Amara took a slow breath. Steadying herself, her mind quieted, shutting out the laughter, the noise, the whispers. All she heard now was the rhythm of footsteps, the shift of bodies. The air moving around her. The boy leaned closer, his voice a low taunt. "What's the matter, blind girl? Gonna cry?" Amara turned her head toward him, her face calm, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles. The boy froze for a split second. Something about that smile unsettled him. It wasn't the smile of someone broken. It wasn't the smile of someone helpless. It was the smile of someone who knew something he didn't. "Give her stuff back, man," a voice from the crowd muttered. It was quiet, hesitant, but it was enough to ripple through the group. The bullies ignored it, but Amara heard. She knew. Not everyone watching wanted this cruelty. Still, no one stepped forward. No one but her. Amara bent slowly, gathering her scattered books. The bullies laughed harder, thinking she was retreating again. But when she straightened, her posture was different. Her shoulders were square, her stance firm. She wasn't holding herself like a victim anymore. She was holding herself like a fighter. The boy reached out again, his hand aiming for her shoulder. Maybe to shove her, maybe to knock her things away once more. But this time, Amara moved. Her hand shot up, fast and precise, catching his wrist. Before it reached her, the crowd gasped, the laughter dying in an instant. No one had ever seen her move like that before. The boy's eyes widened in shock. What he started, but the words caught in his throat. Her grip was firm, unshakable. Amara tilted her head slightly, listening. His breath was uneven now. His weight shifted nervously from one foot to another. She could feel the tension. In his wrist, the panic he was trying to hide. Calmly, without raising her voice, she spoke. I said, "Give it back." The words were steady, controlled, but they carried a power that silenced the entire schoolyard. The boy tried to pull his hand away, but she tightened her grip, twisting just enough to make him stumble. The crowd gasped again. The bully, who once looked untouchable, now looked small. Caught off guard by the very girl he had mocked. His friends stepped forward, unsure, but Amara turned her head slightly toward them. She could hear their footsteps. The shuffle of their nervous shoes, the crack in their laughter. They hesitated. For the first time, they weren't sure if this was still a game. Amara released the boy's wrist, letting him stumble back. The silence in the schoolyard was heavy, pressing on everyone's shoulders. Her patience was gone. The time for silence was over. She had endured enough. This was her breaking point, tanned from this moment forward. The bullies would never see her the same way again, because the blind girl they had humiliated was about to reveal the truth they never saw coming. The schoolyard was silent. The same crowd that had laughed moments ago now stood frozen, their voices caught in their throats. The boy who had mocked Amara stumbled backward, rubbing his wrist in disbelief. His arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by something he had never expected to feel around her fear. Amara stood tall, calm, her books still clutched in one hand. Her other hand hung loose at her side, relaxed but ready. Her face didn't carry anger. It carried control. Our silence wasn't weakness anymore, it was power. The bullies exchanged glances. They didn't know what to do. They had seen Amara humiliated 100 times before, and it had always been easy. But this was different. Something had shifted. She wasn't their victim anymore. One of the boys stepped forward, trying to regain the crowd's laughter. "Come on," he sneered, his voice trembling slightly. "She's just pretending. She can't do anything." He reached out, his hand aiming for her backpack. Amara moved faster than anyone could follow. She pivoted lightly on her heel, her hand snapping up to block his arm. In the same motion, she twisted, using his own momentum to push him back. He stumbled hard, nearly falling to the ground. Gasps erupted from the crowd. What just happened? Someone whispered. She blocked him. Another voice answered in awe. The boy scrambled back to his feet, red-faced. She got lucky. He shouted, but the fear in his voice betrayed him. The ringleader tried to take control again. He stepped forward, fists clenched, determined to prove she was still weak. "Enough of this," he growled. "Sit down, blind girl. You don't scare me." But Amara heard the crack in his voice. She heard the shift in his breathing, the way his feet scraped nervously against the ground. She didn't need to see his face to know the truth. He lunged, the crowd gasped, holding their breath. But Amara was ready. She stepped aside smoothly, her caneless hand guiding his movement past her. Then, with precise control, she placed her palm against his shoulder and pushed just enough. He stumbled forward, off balance, nearly crashing into his own friends. The students erupted in shock. Laughter no longer belonged to the bullies. It rippled now through the crowd, directed at them. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. She didn't even look at him, she just knew. Another said the bullies were panicking now. Their power came from the crowd's fear, but that fear was gone, replaced by wonder, replaced by respect. The girl bully, the one who had always mocked. Amara, with her fake sweetness, tried to step in. "You think you're tough?" she snapped, her voice higher than usual. "You're nothing without your cane." She shoved Amara's arm, but Amara didn't move an inch. Her stance was solid, grounded. She turned her head toward the girl, her face calm but unshakable. The girl froze, realizing too late that she was standing in front of someone who wasn't afraid anymore. The crowd was dead silent again. Every eye was fixed on Amara. She lifted her chin slightly, her voice steady and clear. "I am not weak. I am not helpless. And I will not let you humiliate me anymore." Her words carried across the schoolyard, cutting through the silence like thunder. The bullies stood frozen. No one dared move. Then, slowly, Amara crouched down and gathered her scattered books. This time, the crowd didn't watch in pity. They watched in awe. Every movement she made was strong, deliberate, powerful. She didn't scramble. She didn't bend under their cruelty. She stood straight again, her belongings in her arms, her head held high. And though she hadn't thrown a single punch, she hadn't hurt a single person. The truth was clear to everyone watching. Amara was a warrior. The crowd began to murmur, voices filled with excitement. "She's amazing. How did she do that? She's not afraid of them." The bullies tried to laugh it off, but the sound was weak, forced. Their power was gone. The crowd wasn't with them anymore. The crowd was with her. Amara didn't wait for more words. She simply walked forward, her cane forgotten on the ground. The bullies stepped aside instinctively, making space for her. For the first time, they moved out of her way as she passed. The ringleader muttered under his breath, "This isn't over." But even he knew it was. The fear in his voice betrayed. His friends didn't laugh. They didn't smirk. They stayed silent, shaken. Amara walked calmly through the crowd, each step steady, each movement confident. She didn't need to see the faces around her to know what they carried. She could hear the respect in the silence, the awe in the whispers. The shift in the air around her, she had revealed her truth. She was not just the blind girl they had mocked. She was not a victim. She was a fighter, a black warrior who had trained for years in silence, waiting for this moment. And now the whole school knew it. For Amara, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about hurting them the way they had hurt her. It was about dignity. It was about showing the men, everyone watching, that strength doesn't depend on sight. Strength comes from spirit. The bullies would never look at her the same again. The crowd would never forget the day they saw her stand tall, and Amara. She finally felt free.